Well, thank you so much for inviting me here today. I'm delighted to talk about this most recent gift that the McMullen Museum of Art received from the Tellalians. It consists now of 29 Coptic textiles. And for viewers who might not know what Coptic textiles are, that's pretty much a generic name for textiles that were excavated in Egypt. They were found primarily in the tombs of Egyptian Christians. And Coptic textiles date broadly from the 3rd century, when Egyptians began to become Christian, and they last up through the Islamic period, and probably the latest date you would give to a so-called Coptic textile would be in the 11th or 12th century. Most of the pieces that we have were excavated between about 1880 and 1910 at various sites where Copts were buried in Egypt. And these textiles have survived as well as they have, largely because of the arid conditions in Egypt. Most of the textiles that we have come from tunics in which these Copts were buried. And some of the textiles are larger hanging furnishing pieces. They could be drapes or tablecloths, and clothed bodies could have been wrapped in them. Now, what happened when these textiles were excavated was that they were often in very poor condition. And certainly in the early years of excavation, they were cut up. The parts of the textiles that were damaged were discarded, and the highly decorated pieces that were in good condition were kept. And they were sold to a number of museums around the world. And sometimes the larger pieces were cut so that museums like the Metropolitan Museum in New York and the V&A in London and the Berlin Bode Museum would all have fragments of the same original textile. We don't have very good records, but there are a lot of these that came out of these Coptic tombs. And we at Boston College are enormously lucky to have such a well-preserved, well-researched, and intelligently collected group of works come to us all as one gift. In 2008, I met Barbara and Don Tellalian. They made an appointment to come to see me in the old McMullen Museum in Devlin Hall after they had seen our wonderful Georges Rouault exhibition. They also collect prints by Rouault. And they came to see me with a self-assembled catalog and all the research that they had done on their textile collection. They had started collecting textiles in the late 70s or early 80s. And it happened because Don Tellalian, who is a well-known architect in Boston, had been working with a firm that did an addition for the Walters Art Gallery in Baltimore. And part of what was installed in his addition was the medieval collection. And he met a number of dealers at the opening, one of whom was Kalekian, who enticed him to start collecting Coptic textiles. And Barb and Don would say that they were really bitten by the bug. This tapped into a deep interest that they had in the Middle East, as they're both of Armenian descent. And it tapped into their scholarly tendencies. So not only did they carefully collect every textile in their collection, they also had every textile in their collection intelligently and beautifully restored and conserved. And they did research on their collection, and they collected a full library of all publications related to their collection. And one of the things that makes this gift so splendid for Boston College is that it comes with, certainly with their research and their beautiful objects, but also their full library. So our students and scholars at BC, of whom there are many interested in this field, can pursue research in this area in our own library immediately. The Tellalians' collection has been well known. They have lent their works to a lot of larger exhibitions at major museums like the Metropolitan and the MFA. But in 2015, the McMullen Museum at Boston College did the largest exhibition of their collection ever. And this came about because at the McMullen Museum, one of our professors of classics, Gail Hoffman, was working on an exhibition with the Yale Art Gallery. And she and a curator from the Yale Art Gallery, Lisa Brody, were organizing an exhibition called Roman in the Provinces, trying to look at Roman art from late antiquity that wasn't from Rome. And the goal of that exhibition was to explore all of this provincial art, which had been for many years neglected, in the hope of trying to understand what kinds of messages were being conveyed within the provinces that were different from the imperial messages that were being conveyed in art in Rome from the same period. And most of the objects for this exhibition were coming from the Yale Art Gallery. But when I realized that we knew of a local collection that had some of the most splendid examples from Egypt in it, I suggested to Gail and Lisa that we include as many of the Tellalian textiles that we could. And we approached Don and Barbara, and they were not only pleased to hear from us, but they offered to be so helpful in this enterprise. And Gail and I then, because they were so helpful, and really would set such a good example as collectors for our students, Gail and I decided that we would teach a course, twice actually, on the lead up to this exhibition, and have our students work on Tellalian textiles. And each student in the class had one of the textiles assigned to him or her. We had 14 students in the class. We photographed the entire Tellalian collection, and Barb and Don invited the students to their house to introduce them to the collection, and then allowed students to visit them as they worked on the collection and on their research. And they came up with stunning results, all of which were incorporated in our 2015 exhibition Roman in the provinces. So I think that we were just so happy to learn from Barbara and Don that they were interested in giving their collection to the McMullen. And we know that our students who worked on the show will be very pleased to see these when they come back to their reunions, because our student body knows them so well. In the future, we're hoping to display these works both together and in various other exhibitions where themes displayed in the textiles are related to other aspects of exhibitions that we're putting together. Coptic Textiles in general have a mixture of secular, Christian, and Egyptian and Greek iconography. They're not, the deciphering of the meanings of the iconography is not always straightforward. Most of them have multivalent meanings, and that was one of the things that we were looking at in Roman in the Provinces. These things gave off mixed messages. They said one thing to Christians, they said other things to Egyptians, they said other things to pagans. And they were helpful to people who were hedging their bets as well. So what we're very excited about is having our faculty at Boston College in departments like classics, art history, theology, and at the School of Ministry and Theology also come to look at these objects. And in fact, a group of them are coming tomorrow to think about themes and ways that these works can be displayed and can serve as triggers for further research into the very early years of Christianity in the Middle East. So we're hoping to put all of these objects up on our website over the summer, since so much research has been done on them already and we photographed them. We only have a few more to photograph. And since all the books will be here, we're hoping that some of our faculty will want to jump in and work on some of the themes that are portrayed in these objects. And we're hoping to do an ebook publication so that all of the research known so far can be printed out by someone who would like to have something tangible to hold on to with our collection in it. But I think our web presence will be very, very strong. And then, of course, we will hope at some point when we've gathered enough new research to do an exhibition displaying what our faculty have done with these objects and how much further they've taken the scholarly inquiry into them. I can say for myself that the week after we got these textiles, I already had my class in early medieval art in Ireland and Britain looking at the textiles, and they were wowed. And for those who don't know much about early medieval art in Ireland, there's always been a suspicion that it is greatly, or it was greatly influenced by Coptic art. And we don't know exactly how those images were conveyed and brought to Ireland. But we see evidence of the iconography. And one of the most likely ways was the importing of textiles from the area around Egypt and other places in the Middle East. Coptic textiles influenced not only developments in Ireland, but probably all across Europe in the early Middle Ages. And we have some Coptic textiles preserved in many church treasuries in Western Europe. There are lots of motifs that were spread by textiles in general. We can't be sure that they came only from Coptic textiles. And one of the things that we always have to remember is that we have a lot of Coptic textiles, because flax was grown in Egypt and there was a lot of linen produced there, but textiles were produced throughout the Middle East. Many have not survived as well, largely because the conditions were not as favorable as they were in Coptic tombs in arid Egypt. But one of the other things that we're hoping to look into is how much scientific analysis we can do on these Coptic textiles now that Boston College possesses a critical mass of them. There are lots of questions about the fibers that can be related to dating. There are a number of questions that can be related to the dyes. And I'm so pleased that we are now going to be launching the Schiller Center at Boston College, where we will be integrating the humanities with scientific discovery. And I'm hoping that our textile collection can be one of the subjects of greater scientific analysis. One of the other things I wanted to mention, and I brought a book with me today. This is called Coptic Art, and it was published in the 60s by a Jesuit called Pierre du Bourget. And Pierre du Bourget was born around the turn of the 20th century. He dies at the end of the 20th century. He's a Parisian Jesuit. And he studies he studies in Paris. I'm not sure exactly where, but he also becomes the chief curator of Coptic material at the Louvre. And he spends a lot of time in Cairo, and he does some of the most significant publications of Coptic textiles. He also, interestingly, established a scientific research in the hopes of trying to date some of these Coptic textiles that he collected himself when he was in Egypt. And the results of his research for the carbon-14 dating have now been questioned, really because the machinery in the 60s and 70s really wasn't what it needed to be to give us proper dates. And he thought a lot of the textiles that he owned might be as late as the 12th century. We now know that that's probably not true. And I'm hopeful that at Boston College we can take up this Jesuit question, which was launched by Pierre du Bourget, and continue his research with this wonderful gift. We're extremely lucky at Boston College that we have just built a new museum with state-of-the-art climate and lighting. And so we are able to house these textiles, which have been so beautifully cared for by the Tellalians, in optimum conditions. And we're hopeful that they will stay like that for the foreseeable future. But we also have a great deal of confidence in the scientists at Boston College and the other research that's going on around the world in museums, that there will be new technologies to keep these textiles in the condition in which we receive them. And speaking about other collections, I think we're very lucky that so many of the largest Coptic textile collections are in the major museums around the world, all of which have research laboratories connected to them. One of the largest collections is, of course, in the Cairo Museum. But after the Cairo Museum, the Louvre, largely as a result of Father du Bourget's work, probably has the largest collection of them and the most spectacular collection of them. There are fabulous collections in Berlin, in the Bode Museum, wonderful collections at the Metropolitan, a very fine collection at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, some excellent examples, but I'm not sure how large a collection at Cleveland. And the other places, I think there are a number of great collections in Russia, in Moscow, and also in St. Petersburg. The Textile Museum in Washington has some very good examples, as does Dumbarton Oaks. But I think among university museums, we would be in the top tier now, having just inherited such a wonderful selection of great works.